So over the years, I've been very interested in happiness, how we can achieve it, how we can teach it. And what I came to realize by studying positive psychology, the science of happiness, was that something very fundamental was missing. So that people were talking about well-being or happiness in a partial way, and they were missing important components. For example, they were teaching the exercise or ideas that you can grasp and become happier, but they were not talking about the physical component of a happy life. They were talking perhaps about nutrition and the physical component, but they weren't talking about the spiritual component. And in order to reach happiness, you need to understand the whole, to treat the whole person. So you need to look at the spiritual element of life, spiritual well-being. You need to look at the physical well-being of a person, the intellectual, the cognitive, because we're also rational animals, as Aristotle said. You need to also look at the relational, the interpersonal components, because man is not an island. We cannot just live without connections. And finally, you also, of course, need to look at the emotional. And so we put together the Wholebeing Institute and the idea of Wholebeing, which is whole person well-being, in order to address the different components of the person. When exploring, when looking at human nature, we identified, and many others have identified, essentially 5 components that make up the whole person. The spiritual component, which is about finding a sense of meaning and purpose in life, which is about experiencing the present moment, experiencing a spiritual dimension. We also identified the physical dimension as important, whether it's physical exercise, whether it's nutrition, whether it's getting adequate rest. Intellectual well-being is often overlooked, but it is important for us to lead a full and fulfilling life, to be engaged with material, to learn something deeply. We also have a curious element to us, to satisfy our curiosity. That's an important part of well-being, of overall happiness. Relational well-being is also important, the interpersonal component. In fact, that's the #1 predictor of happiness, quality relationships we have with people we care about and who care about us. And finally, the emotional component, allowing pleasurable emotions to flow through us, being resilient in the face of painful emotions. So all these components, these SPIRE components, the spiritual, the physical, the intellectual, the relational, and the emotional, are critical for a happy life. And when one part is missing, the whole is affected. When one part is enhanced, when one part is cultivated, the whole is being affected too. The connection between SPIRE, the 5 components of SPIRE, and the model of the body, mind, spirit is an intimate one. What we did with SPIRE is we broke it down a little bit more. So for example, when I cultivate intellectual well-being, I'm affecting the mind. I'm also affecting the mind when I do meditation. I'm affecting the soul when I cultivate healthy relationships. In this respect, SPIRE is more prescriptive. It describes paths that we can take, actual action that we can take in order to increase our overall well-being. And through that, mind, body, and spirit. For me, the most important aspect of the Wholebeing approach is how it can be applied. So ideas for ideas' sake are interesting, but it's not enough. I would like to see the Wholebeing approach applied in schools. For example, I would love schools to think not just about the cognitive, the intellectual component, but to also think about the spiritual component, helping students identify a sense of purpose, teaching them to be present, mindful to the miracle of existence. I would like schools to also teach and practice much more sports, exercise, teach nutrition, huge problem in our society today. I would like schools to teach about relationships. We have a science of well-being related to relationships, and yet we don't learn. We just get into a relationship and assume that somehow we know how to be in a relationship. Well, there are certain things that we can learn, that science can teach us. And finally, how to deal with emotions, how to become more resilient, how to cultivate more positive emotions in our lives. All these things today can be taught. And this is what I hope will become part of a school curriculum. Same with politicians. I would like politicians to think about the whole being of their nation, not just to think about GDP, but to think about GNH, gross national happiness, and to think about that. You want to break happiness down. You know, happiness is like a big light, white light. You want to break it down like a rainbow to its components so that you can better deal with it and understand. So how can you introduce more whole being into society as a politician, whether it's through education, whether it's through the way you build your cities? Media should think about whole being, because media is very powerful. It's a powerful force. Why not use it as a force to promote whole being? Sense of purpose for people, help people cultivate healthier relationships, have programs about nutrition. Why not, through the media, teach people how to better deal with emotions, painful emotions, and cultivate more pleasurable ones. Businesses need to think more about whole being. When you increase the happiness levels of the employees, productivity goes up, creativity goes up, teamwork improves, turnover goes down. Businesses would do well to think more about the whole being of their managers, the whole being of the entire organization. So I would like to see much more application.